I'm just not comfortable with voting for something that I believe will create a detriment.
Mr. Pond?
Two or three questions for the applicant. Could you go over the number of assembly areas and and I assume the largest one of the sanctuaries, the one that you're using as the yardstick to say that you're originally parking? Could you kind of go through it?
Well, the assembly areas, I don't have a chart that lists all the assembly areas, but the largest assembly area is the chapel. And the reason why we use the chapel as the largest assembly area is that's what your ordinance calls for. In the parking ordinance, it says that you base your parking based on the largest assembly area. The other assembly areas are basically classrooms. And as Mr. Adams went through last time, and the points that we made with staff and with the city attorney's office is that you can't take each one of those classrooms and say you've got to park each one of these classrooms, because there are multiple incidences where one classroom, there would be one theory room, which would be associated with 4 or 5 other classrooms where the people that are in that theory room would get up and go and do practical application of what they just learned at their own rate in the various other classrooms that support that one classroom. And so you can't look at it as if they're going to all be occupied, because there might be 5 classrooms that support one classroom, and the occupancy of that one classroom dictates the occupancy of all of it, because there are chairs or space reserved for that one member in the various other classrooms, and they're not going to be at the same place at the same time.
But isn't it fair to think through this and say that we're using the yardstick for a sanctuary to determine the traffic requirements and parking requirements, but to some extent this building use is more like a trading center. It isn't a very large sanctuary that is the biggest piece of the building like a traditional church that many of these standards are.
No, sir, I don't think that's the case, and that's why we did parking studies of other Church of Scientology locations. Nashville is a brand new church, just like what we're proposing to build. It's a slightly smaller church than what we're proposing to build. And if you look in the parking study, they had 41 spaces at the maximum, at the peak hour of when the church has the most people in that facility. 41 parking spaces that were being utilized. And so, and that church is has 5 times the active members and 4 times the staff. And so, no, I don't believe that's correct. What we did was we provided parking studies to provide evidence to the staff of what the actual utilization would be when they had questions about total occupancy, and the fact that what happens about if originally they were requiring us to park the sanctuary, the offices, and the classrooms as if every one of them was going to be parked at its full extent, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There's not another church in the city of Sandy Springs, nor in the city of Atlanta for that matter, that has that. And so, but what we were willing to do was to cap our occupancy to address the concern that was raised in the neighborhoods about, oh gosh, there might be 1,000 people there. Or this might turn into Buckhead Church, which was down the street, that had 3,900 people that would come in and out on a Sunday. That's not the way they operate. And so that's why we addressed it with an occupancy number.
Well, let me ask you another question. I do have 2 more questions, and I think these are important. Why cannot your client go ahead and use the facilities as a current zone without expanding the size beyond the 32,000 square feet, maintain the existing parking?
Well, the problem with that is it doesn't allow them to exercise their religion in the way in which they exercise their religion. They need a great deal of space. They have the principles of their founder dictate what the use of space and the fact that they do need a great deal of space per member. And so, based on those principles, they've developed an ideal organization. And all of the churches within the Church of Scientology are going to an ideal organization, the smallest of which is a 38,000 square foot facility. And that is not adequate to meet their needs. And what you're asking us to do is to go to a 32,000 square foot facility, and that does not meet their requirements. And so it's based on that, and based on the way in which they practice their religion, that's what dictates the fact that they need the additional space and the fact that they don't need the additional parking. If we do need additional parking, we will provide it.
Well, I wasn't here at the previous meeting you came before the board, but there was no mention 2 months ago of needing this additional space. So, I mean, why?
Yes, sir, there was, absolutely. We have always requested 43,916 square feet. We have never requested 32,000.
But it was originally passed along with the limitation of 32,000.
That was the Planning Commission's recommendation pursuant to the staff's recommendation at the time. And this was sent back to you because the city council, we had negotiated the conditions just prior to the negotiated conditions with the city attorney and with the development staff, community development staff. We had negotiated those conditions just prior to the city council, and they wanted it sent back. We didn't ask for it to be deferred. So if you have an issue with that, it's the city council. But the city council elected for it to come back to you so that you would see the conditions that are recommended and that they will consider when they consider their request.
I hear you loudly and clearly. I just want to be clear. So what I'm hearing is if the applicant doesn't get its 43,000 square feet, you would not accept anything less than that.
Well, we need the 43,000 square feet, yes, sir. We want the 43,000 square feet. If you choose to recommend the lower square footage, then you're going to go, we'll go up with the same recommendation you had last time.
Or we could go ahead and vote on the alternate conditions. It's 43,000 feet. That's what you're saying we should consider the application.
That is our request. Yes, sir, that is our request. Our request is that you approve the alternate conditions. It is within your discretion to approve what you choose to approve, and we will go forward to the city council.
Clear for me?
Okay. Anything further, Mr. Rubenstein?
You know, I would be, or I am concerned with really any church locating at this intersection. It's a troublesome intersection, and I probably had a few near misses there myself. That being said, I do realize that these folks are going to use this church in a way that may be different than what we think of as traditional churches, and I think that's why we voted last month to allow them to proceed pursuant to staff conditions, not the alternative staff conditions, but the original staff conditions of keeping the building the same size. As I'm hearing more and more about the way this church operates and what Mark shared with me, I know it's a church, but it seems to look and feel a lot like an office building, and will operate a lot like an office building in terms of traffic count and parking. And so, you know, I'm leaning towards really sticking with the same way I voted last month. You know, I think we should allow these folks to maintain the building as is. Hopefully the burden on the neighborhood will be no more than what it was as a general office building, but I think I have a hard time allowing them to increase the square footage and reduce the parking.